Welcome back to Join Our Time. My name is Terry Bates. I'm the pastor of Faith Church here in Oklahoma City, and we're delighted that you've taken the time to join in for this program today. And we're talking today about substance abuse, and in particular, we're going to turn our attention to the challenge that this has for women. We often hear about the conversation as it relates to men, but there is a significant challenge for women in this area of substance abuse as well. We have with us today Allyson Lang, who is representing Hope is Alive here in Oklahoma City, and she's going to give us a little more insight on this area of substance abuse in women. Allyson, it's great to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the program of Hope is Alive. We talked a little bit about the men's version, but how this is also now serving women also.
Yes, we were really excited. Last year in December, we launched our first women's home as part of Hope is Alive Ministries, which started about 5 years ago. So our women's home has been going for a year, and we are getting ready to open our second house here in Oklahoma City, and we are very excited because it's desperately needed for women in Oklahoma. And
there has to be some different challenges that women face in this arena of getting the help that they need as opposed to men. Why don't you give me an idea of what some of those challenges might look like?
Well, first and foremost, most of these women are mothers. And so they're risking losing their children first and foremost by just admitting the fact that they might have a substance abuse problem. That first and foremost, and then coupled with there's not a lot of resources for women. The resources for women in Oklahoma are 1 in 5. So that's 25% of their male counterparts. So even if a woman does want help, the fact that she's going to, be struggling to find a bed in a treatment center somewhere is really debilitating for them and taking that first step forward.
So what do you feel like has been maybe the tipping point for a woman when she finally walks through the door? What really brought her to that humbling moment to say, I need help? Typically,
it's losing everything. We call it the rock bottom, but the rock bottom can be elusive in so many areas. Typically, it's losing family support, losing their children, having legal consequences that have stacked up for them to get them to that point that they're ready to submit their lives to something better.
Have you discovered that maybe if you're a parent and you have a son that deals with drug abuse or substance abuse and you have a daughter that's dealing with substance abuse, do you feel like the parents treat those cases differently?
Absolutely. They do, because it's as a parent, I think it's a natural to protect our daughters more. Men can go out and fend for themselves, but women should be protected and coddled, and so it's a longer addiction typically for women. Because of that reason, they have men in their lives that enable them, they have parents in their lives that enable them, and so it just stretches out that time and that addiction process for them.
How about on the recovery side? Is it harder and longer for women to break out of that cycle too?
Absolutely, and we believe at Hope is Alive in a long-term program for our women. Our program's 18 months because we really believe we have to holistically rebuild their lives financially, emotionally, spiritually, all the Alees you can think of, because our women's lives are so torn apart by the time that they do get there, and the lack of resources that, when a woman comes out of treatment, a sober living house or a mentoring home is needed for them for that long term, and there's only 109 sober living beds in the state of Oklahoma for women, and there's 900 for men. And so just fighting for that, and typically they're going back to homes that are full of physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, and so the likelihood that they can stay clean and sober in those situations is dismal.
So we know as Christians that there's a significant plus factor when you have the God factor on your side. So if you're looking at your program for just a minute, about in what ways would you incorporate the spiritual aspects into the program itself? How would these ladies not just get the lifestyle structure change, but also get the spiritual reinforcement that they need?
Well, you walk in our doors and you can tell that it's all about Jesus. I'll tell you that from the very first day that they walk in, and we believe at Hope is Alive that there's no long-term sobriety without a spiritual solution. It's all about a spiritual solution, especially for women, because they carry all this guilt and shame on their backs from their addiction, and the love of a Heavenly Father filling all those nooks and crannies and taking that away is really the only thing that will keep them sober long-term. And so we also do it through meetings. We have Sunday night meetings at our house that we have speakers come in, a lot of time pastors, community leaders, and things like that. And then we'll talk about at our house meetings on Wednesdays as well, and our girls are required to go to church. We have an optional Bible study in our house, and so it's really Christ-centered and filled in every area of their lives.
When I was talking with Devin about the men's program at Hope is Alive, I kind of focused on the area of self-deception because I think for men that's a major problem. I'm not saying it doesn't play a role in women, but as a pastor for 40 years, I've seen self-deception play significantly. My observation, and I'm not a professional here on this in this subject, but I have seen a lot of women that I have known have struggled. It seemed to feed out of what I will call an approval addiction, that they were looking for that approval and they wanted to be approved by their peers, by their kids, by their husband. And so this is a driving force. So coming in, maybe for them, substance abuse is not about getting high, it's about coping.
Yes.
So how do you give them new coping mechanism skills, not only in lifestyle, but also with scriptures? So maybe finding the approval of God for themselves as opposed to finding man's approval. Is that a key part of what you do?
You get it, absolutely. You know, we really believe with our women especially, we deal with substance abuse and sobriety is just a qualifier to get our girls in the door. We really focus on process addictions in our home, which is exactly what you're talking about, things like codependency, love addiction, sex addiction, control, perfectionism, eating disorders, which we really see as kind of what our girls step to first. And then when that stops working for approval, men and all of those things, they go to a substance abuse addiction. And so we really believe that we have to get them into recovery, complete recovery, and approval with themselves, with their Heavenly Father, in order to have long-term sobriety.
So how does the family play a key role now? Because as we've pointed out, daughters are typically a little bit more connected back to the family. So for families listening, they've got a daughter, a niece, a granddaughter, somebody that they see in this cycle. What are some of the recommendations that you have that they could maybe do to help bring them out of this pattern?
It's going to be the toughest thing they're ever going to do. But the first thing is setting boundaries. We have to set boundaries to protect ourselves, because if we want them to care about themselves, we have to start with ourselves. We have to model that, just like as we were children modeling appropriate behavior. And so setting boundaries, following through with those boundaries, which is really hard. You know, it's easy for us to say, I'm not going to, give them any money. I'm not going to support them in this way. But actually following through with that is difficult for parents. And, all of our girls' stories start with my family decided they had enough. And it's devastating to them in that moment, but really parents are powerful in this process. And so maybe it's a genetic thing that has been passed down, the addiction, and so getting into recovery themselves is also really important.
So really the family has to switch a role from being enablers to being empowerers. They really have to stop saying, I'm going to help you with your addiction. I'm not going to watch the kids so you can go do this or do that. And that's hard because they love these kids. They're their grandkids. They're not only their daughter, but they love them so very, very much. But if these parents could really understand the shift in their assignment is to figure out how to help their daughter be empowered, better empowered to deal with the challenges that they're dealing with in life. So you've opened 2 homes in Oklahoma City. I know there's probably many more on the dream stages alive, but the residential programs here, tell me the importance of why that residence program, as opposed to, okay, the girl lives at home, tries to keep her job, and go to an AA meeting, not to discredit those programs, but how can this really help by putting them into a full immersion experience? Well,
first of all, structure. We really believe in a complete structured environment, and also accountability. We have roommates for our girls. I know what time they woke up, what they ate for breakfast. We are in each other's lives. We believe in doing life together. And so those accountability, that way we can see, the progression if something is coming up, if a relapse is on the horizon. It doesn't just happen overnight. It happens with slow, small steps, and so we can correct those. And oftentimes, they were living at home when it happened, and so it's not the safest place to go back to. We talk about triggers in our house, things that bring up old memories and thought processes that we need to steer away from. And so we believe in changing people, places, and things. And that means that completely altering your life, getting rid of your old friends, getting rid of your old home and those things, and really the family staying strong. Because a lot of times they'll let them come back into the house and it's the same environment that they left, and it's not necessarily the healthiest for them. And so when they come into our house, we surround them with structure, we surround them with grace and understanding and love. And these are things that these girls haven't had from women in their lives, friendships and those things. Usually it's just relationships that they've had. And so really rebuilding their self-confidence as a person and the love of a Heavenly Father. And it's a magical place to be.
So contrast for me to the best of your ability, and I know you can't stereotype every situation, but give me maybe a brief perspective of what the woman is thinking and feeling when she walks in the door, and what she might be feeling and thinking when she walks out the door?
Great question. I think when she walks in the door, she's full of shame. She's full of guilt for the decisions she made, especially our mothers that are in our house. The guilt that they've ruined their children's lives, that they've passed this down to their children. You know, I would love to take a picture when our girls walk in the door, because it's nothing like what they look like when they leave. You know, they're sunken in, they're hunched over. You know, they're just filled with so much shame and doubt and fear. And when they walk out of our doors, oh my goodness, they have completely transformed their lives. Most of the time, physically, you won't even, you know, you don't even recognize them. But spiritually, they're on fire for Jesus, which is incredible. They're changing lives. They're telling their story. And they're speaking to the women that are going to come behind them and find sobriety. And so they leave our house whole. Which is a really important word, because then I'm not looking for something else to fill me, which is what a substance abuse addiction is. And so they leave whole and connected to their families again, and grace-filled and not judgmental. They're rigid, you know, they come in so rigid and in control of everything, and they realize that, you know, God's in control. He's got this, and if I follow His will, then I can do this.
Right.
So that's kind of the difference.
You know, I love a simple phrase. I don't know if I heard it or coined it. It's been so many parts of my life for so many years, but I love this term that I refer to called redemption and lift. And many times when people come in, they're kind of, as you said, hitting bottom. And when we give them redemption, not just a program, not just a meal and a place to sleep, although those are all very critical pieces of what you do, when we show them true spiritual redemption, then we get the spiritual man lifted up, then the rest of the life begins to want to conform and adjust. And you can take somebody that's lost a great career or lost a great family, and they can pick that back up together, put it back together again, and become a very valuable, contributing part of society. So I like talking about redemption and lift, and undoubtedly you can see that happening in your program.
Absolutely. You know, redemption is all over our ladies, and you know, it takes that transformation, and I believe our girls you know, have a future, and this has just been a stumbling block along the way, but they can use this as their platform later on in life to change thousands of lives, to bring girls along spiritually, to bring girls along with their recovery. And so yes, it is a redemption story, and we're just lucky that we get to facilitate it and just be a part of it and believe in them until they can believe in themselves, and believe in them spiritually and speak into their lives spiritually, so that they can find that unconditional love and grace and understanding for themselves.
Incredible. Well, Allyson, we're so grateful that we have Hope is Alive here in Oklahoma City, and seeing it flourish and expand to more programs, more residential services, and people can go and search the Google for Hope is Alive right here in Oklahoma City and learn a little bit more about what you guys are doing. And we applaud you and thank you for helping not just the men, but also now the women in a very focused way make that transition in your life. We've been visiting with Allyson Lang with Hope is Alive right here in Oklahoma City, and she's been talking to us about the women's residential program for women dealing with substance abuse. And to remind you, whether you're that person or whether you're the parent of that person, there is hope, and hope is alive. Thank you for watching Joy in Our Town.